Week 14 of the NFL season is upon us. It's Friday morning. That means we must be talking DFS. We'll go through the whole slate, hit all the games for you. Oh, and I think Deebo Samuel will score again. Happy Friday morning, everybody. Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, the Friday DFS version. If you are listening to us or watching us live, welcome. If you're watching us on delay, welcome. If you're listening to the audio version, we appreciate that too. Thanks, everybody, for listening as always. If you can please rate and review the podcast, we would definitely appreciate that too. It's Friday morning. I'm Scott Jenstad, joined by Ryan Belongia. As always, we're going to be talking about the whole Sunday slate. Ryan, how are you today?
Well, I was doing better until you brought up Deebo Samuel again.
Are you? Were you not play any of them, or did you play Ayuk instead?
I didn't have Deebo in any of my bigger stuff or anything where it mattered, and I was having a good day until Deebo crushed me at the end. Yeah, he ended up being really popular too, more popular than I thought. I don't know. I guess it's my fault for not having exposure to him. I thought it was a good spot, but yeah, the Niners crushed and Deebo crushed, and if you didn't have him and Purdy, you probably weren't winning. But I don't know. Your Niners look pretty good. Did you play Deebo?
I played Purdy, Ayuk, Devontae Smith on one of my two lineups with Michael Pittman too. That was my Zach Moss fade, but it kind of went. It cashed, but it kind of went. Didn't do much elsewhere, unfortunately. And I wish I had gone Deebo instead. But Devontae was clearly the answer there as the run back, and Michael Pittman was like a huge key. Because you played him instead of Moss, that was big. But I forget where else it failed. I think I had Kate Otten on the team, and he had 0 catches, which never worked. I was looking for any kind of cheap tight end because obviously when you go with the expensive receivers, you had to find somewhere cheap, and that didn't work. But it was an okay day. But obviously the Niners winning, it was a really fun game. And that first quarter was so dominated by Philly. I was like, what is going on? But holding them to 2 field goals is big, and then all of a sudden they just started rolling. But they look good. It was also a perfect spot. We talked about it last week. Like Philly was off 2 really tough games. Their defense faced 90-plus plays against the Bills. They have the Cowboys this week. Like it was a really, really tough spot for Philly. I do get that, but. And the Niners were really still mad about last year, so it was a really good spot. But tell you what, if they play again, that sets up a really fun revenge game.
Yeah,
I think they play again at some point too.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah. Sorry, you got me thinking about Kate Otten now too. I had Kate Otten in my. I played the $333 tournament, which is in the afternoon. I only play like 4 lineups in the afternoon, so most of my exposure is in that big tournament, and I missed the cash line by 2 spots with Kate Otten, with the Kate Otten donut in there. And yeah, it's just a min cash, but a $500 min cash helps. Helps sure. Especially when Deebo is crushing your dreams in the main slate. So
and Kate Otten's there just to go 4 for 45. Like, just give me that, and we're
right,
good.
That's it.
It was 0-0. It was rough out there, but
yep.
So
anyway,
let's jump into week 14. We have a good sized slate here. We got 11 games, one more than we had the last couple times. There's 2 teams on bye. The Cardinals and the Commanders are on bye. I don't think anybody's going to cry too much about those teams, although Commanders are right. We have 4 primetime games this week. We had Pittsburgh and New England last night, which it went over in the second quarter, which was some good fun on Twitter. Eagles Cowboys, big game of the week, is actually Sunday night this week, so will not be on the main slate. Titans Dolphins and Packers Giants. We have the dual Monday night games again this week, so those are off the slate, but. It's an interesting slate on Sunday. We have like 2 games that are on the higher scoring edge, 3 that are in the middle, and then 6 games that are insanely low. We have 2 games that are under 33 this week, which is wild. We had 1 game last week at 33, and I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. Now we have 2, 3, if you count last night with the Pats and Steelers. We're in a combo of a lot of bad offenses, a lot of bad quarterback, a lot of second string quarterbacks, and a lot of weather coming into play too. So it's a time of year, but it's worse this year because there's so many quarterback injuries.
Yeah, I mean, you said it, and it makes, I guess, just less games stand out on every slate. You end up seeing like 2 or 3 that maybe you can target. I mean, we have the Bills and Chiefs on this slate.
Yeah, great game.
Great game, highest total. Probably will be pretty popular just because there's not that much else. Kind of like the spot.
Yet weirdly, the Chiefs have not been very good on offense. It's very strange. Like Mahomes is like a not out of the top 12 quarterbacks like 4 of the last 5 weeks. It's a weird year.
Yeah, I think he hasn't put up more than 20. He's put up more than 20 fantasy points in like one of his last 5 or one of his last 6 or something.
I think
really
he has
weird.
I think he has 2 top 6 weeks all year, if I read the stat right. Like 2 great weeks this season, which seems impossible for week 14.
Yeah, it really does. You figure if this might be a spot that could bring him out of it. I mean, the Bills have been playing faster. We just saw, that Bills-Eagles game, back and forth, points. Josh Allen and, these matchups with KC in the past, we've seen them shoot out. I kind of like the Bills coming off a bye here. The Chiefs defense is dealing with a few injuries now. They're not quite as good as they were at the beginning of the season. The Bills defense, we know they have a ton of injuries. Yeah, you can just see this game going back and forth. So I have some interest. I think the game I'm most interested in, maybe not the game, but I kind of like the Bears. Also coming off a bye.
Not to spoil the chalk segment, but I think DJ Moore is going to be insanely popular, 6,500.
Yeah.
There are not a lot of mid-range receivers, and he sticks out pretty well in this game.
Yeah, he does. Really like DJ Moore too. The Lions just lost their top inside defensive lineman. Their defense was already struggling. We saw them struggling against the Packers.
Yeah.
They had kind of that weird game last week against the Saints where they got up big and then almost blew it.
Yep.
Yeah, I just think, the Bears teams had to wait till week 13 to get these buys, like you were mentioning last week. I think it probably should have helped the Bears.
Yeah,
they get a home match. Yeah, you'd think so. They get a home matchup against the Lions, who they were good against in the last game. Fields ran for over 100 yards. They almost beat the Lions in Detroit. So, yeah, I have some interest in that game. And then I'm going to save the 49ers game for you. But I probably have some interest there too. The other one is Indy and Cincy.
Yeah.
Again, these Colts games have just been great for fantasy all season. And it's really about
Jake Browning was 32 of 37 on Monday night. Where the hell did that come from? That was wild.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. He was awesome in that game.
He was awesome.
Yeah.
And you can't really ignore that. That's what makes this game more interesting. You still have Zach Moss cheap, and the usage on the Colts is pretty tight. It's Pittman, Downs. Last week, Pierce got involved, but, they play fast. They run no huddle. Cincy's defense is bad against the run and the pass. Cincy's defense, they're also allowing highest explosive play rate in the league. And then, like you said, it's Browning that really makes the game compelling. He was great. Completed 87% of his passes. Chase had a big game. Chase looks kind of cheap. I thought we might be done rostering Chase when Burrow went out, but if Browning's going to be decent, it's a pretty good price tag on Chase. So yeah, I have some interest there. So
if that Bengals game was on Sunday, Chase would be like 8,200 this week, right? Like the fact that was on Monday was huge.
Yeah, and even Browning too might be a little bit more expensive.
Yeah,
Mixon even had a decent game. I don't know. That game's interesting. What do you think?
You mentioned 4 of the 5 games that are like over 40, over 41 over-unders. We got Bills Chiefs is 48.5. You mentioned that. That's obviously going to be the most popular game. Big game, 1 o'clock game, obviously big name teams. Bills, and I don't want to call it a must-win, but it's pretty damn close to a must-win. Like, if they go to 6-7, they pretty much have to win out at that point in the AFC, but Pittsburgh going in the tank the last 2 weeks helped them a lot. I mean, losing home games to Arizona and New England is just brutal for Pittsburgh. They were 7-4 with those 2 games coming up. Like, they're pretty much a lock to make the playoffs at that point. Easy 9-4, worst case 8-5. The fact they lost both those games is wild. Then we have the Niners in Seattle's 46.5. I think that Niners are at home, big favorites, but if you figure that Seattle's pass D looked really good last week. I mean, I think Geno was the number 1 quarterback last week in the game against the Cowboys. DK scored 3 times or whatever it was. So maybe you figure Geno's back a little bit. All the Niners defense since the bye has been nasty. Lions Bears is 43.5. You mentioned that game. Colts Bengals 43.5, and then Broncos Chargers at 43.5. I have no idea what to do with Broncos Chargers. I I think I'm at the point where I just can't figure out what to do with the Chargers. They go into New England, bad weather, but a 6-0 game. Like, weirdly enough, that the defense played really well, but can you count that against New England? Although New England offense looked better yesterday, last night. But Herbert, it's just been doing nothing. It's been really quiet for most of the second half of the season here. What do you do with Broncos Chargers? Because they're in this mix at 43.5. I have no idea what to do with this game.
Yeah, I didn't really either. I'm leaning towards just ignoring it. Kind of like you said, they haven't been very good. And then the Broncos, the Broncos haven't really either. People, even in spots where Broncos games have looked decent, like last week, for example, against Houston and other weeks, they try to slow it down. They don't want to get in shootouts. And then last week, the Chargers 6 points, against in a pretty good spot against New England. I don't know. And then the other thing I saw is that, Keenan Allen, while no one stands out that they're going to be so chalky in that range, but I see Keenan might be the most popular of the expensive receivers, just like sort of another reason for me to fade if that's really going to be the case. I don't know. Yeah, the Chargers frustrate me, and I feel like I'd rather just look at other spots.
Yeah, it's funny because the Broncos have always been winning a lot of games lately. If you look at Russ, he's thrown over 200 yards once in the last 9 weeks. That's right. It's not 300 yards. It's 200 yards. I know he had a rushing touchdown each of the last 2 weeks, and that's huge for fantasy value. But like, it's just the ceiling, though. Like you mentioned, the way they play, like he had 300 yards in week 2 and week 3, and since week 5, he's at over 200 yards once. Like it's clear that they have changed what they do. They changed how they want to play. They're leaning on their defense. It's just hard to visualize shootout games with them just because of the way they play. It's just it's a little frustrating fantasy wise. I mean, it's obviously working real football wise, so more power to them. But every time I'm like, oh, I'll just play, Russ. They're playing well, playing as the Chargers. We get back and forth, and I look, and he throws for no yards every week.
Yeah, and he's needed those rushing TDs, and he still doesn't get to 20 fantasy points. Yeah, I think just the writing's kind of on the wall.
Yeah, he's actually running more. He's at over 30 yards in 4 of the last 5, but not over 50 yards there. So he's not like he's going Justin Fields. I'm going to mess up names again, the baseball name. I mean, Justin Fields, not Josh Fields. Justin Fields is not going full there. So yeah, so it's an interesting set of games. I kind of like Lions Bears too. I think that's going to end up being a pretty popular game for a 43.5 total. I think a lot of people are going to lean on that game. The Lions defense, the last 6 weeks has been struggling. It's been a different defense than it was the first half of the season. So I think people will see that. You look at Justin Fields, the 4 games he's played, DJ Moore's been a top 10 receiver in the last 4 games he played. So he may not throw for a lot of yards, but he runs for a lot, and then all his yards go to DJ Moore. So it's one of those things. I think it'll be a lot of Fields, DJ Moore, and then come back with someone on the Lions, whether it be Laporta, whether it be Amon-Ra. I think that will be a popular start to many people's builds.
Yeah, I think so too, and it makes sense.
Yeah. Let's look real quick at these low games. We've got 6 games that are under 41 on the total. A couple that are, a few that are kind of close to that, so it could be usable. Rams Ravens is 40.5. Vikings Raiders. I think that's a mildly interesting game of this group down here. I think Vikings Raiders is mildly interesting. Indoors in Vegas. Justin Jefferson's back this week, 40.5 there. Tampa Atlanta 39.5. I think that anything with Tampa and Atlanta kind of gets pretty dull unless you're playing Rashad White. Panthers Saints at 37.5. We think that Jameis Winston's going to be playing for the Saints in that game. I don't know if that's good or bad. It's probably good for Taysom Hill more than anything. Get him a few more snaps. Although the Taysom Hill thing, since I mentioned, it's kind of interesting because if Jameis starts and Carr is out, Taysom then is the backup quarterback. Do you think that affects how they use him, knowing that if he gets hurt, they don't have a backup quarterback? I wonder if because he's a third string quarterback, you can kind of run him out there as much as you want. Do you think there's any sort of crap, he's our backup, we can't run him in the line 15 times this week?
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about it, but maybe, yeah. It was interesting to see Kamara got 2 goal line carries last week.
He had a third touchdown that got overturned, and then Taysom scored the next play. He could have 3 touchdowns. Yes,
and they were even one of them, I think both of them, Taysom had taken handoffs before that to the one, and then they didn't leave him in, and Kamara came in. Yeah, that was kind of interesting.
Taysom had 15 touches last week.
Yeah, so, you can go both ways on it. If he's going to get 15 touches again.
He's a slam dunk if he gets 15 touches, right? I don't think we know that's going to happen, but that is and then it was wild because they were cheering every time he came in, then booing when Carr came back in. It was rough there.
Poor Carr.
I know it's rough. And then under 33, we have a couple games down here. We have Texans Jets at 32.5. Poor CJ Stroud gets stuck in this game. No Tank Dell, who had the ugly broken leg injury last week. I don't know why he's blocking in the interior part of the line on a run play up the middle of the goal line, but it was awful. It happened. It had been a really fun story. And then we've got Jags Brown down here, anywhere between like 30.5, 31.5. It's gone up a couple clicks, but Jags Browns. We don't know who's playing quarterback for Jacksonville. Is kind of the big issue here. We don't actually know who's playing quarterback for the Browns either. It might be DTR. It might be Flacco. Jacksonville, CJ Beathard got hurt backing up Trevor Lawrence when he limped to the locker room. Trevor Lawrence has not been ruled out. I think it's just a game where everybody's like, I have no idea what's happening here. It could be really, really ugly. Maybe if Lawrence plays, that goes up. But it's a game where, the injured quarterbacks are really affecting the total.
Yeah, we got to wait on all that news for that game because there could be some pieces there. Again, I would want Joe Flacco to start.
Yep. Elijah Moore becomes a play again if Flacco starts for sure. We joked about it last week with their connection, but he didn't do a lot. But he had 83 yards. He had 12 targets last week.
He had 12 targets and 250 air yards. He led the league in air yards. I mean, Flacco was airing it out. Part of it with the 12 targets was that Amari Cooper was out with the concussion.
Yep.
So I would wait and see. It kind of seems like Cooper might miss again, but again, it's too early to tell. So if Flacco started and Cooper was also out, I would have a ton of interest in Elijah Moore again and interest in David Njoku. And then, on the Jacksonville side, looked like Lawrence was going to be out, but now he's practicing and trending towards maybe playing. I don't know. Have to wait and see on that because Christian Kirk is out. You could maybe take a chance on Calvin Ridley if Lawrence played. So a lot of low total games, but they are kind of interesting. At least pieces in most of the games are interesting. You mentioned, what are people going to do with Justin Jefferson? That's kind of an interesting spot. Looks like a decent spot for Josh Jacobs on the other side.
Yep.
New Orleans might have some pieces on New Orleans, like you kind of mentioned already. Is Jameis being in better for someone like Olave? I don't know. But regardless, I think it's just such a good matchup for New Orleans that you figure someone is going to have a big fantasy game. It was almost Olave last week.
Yeah, he had still a good game, but he got tackled at the 2, I think, twice.
Yeah, he was like my highest owned receiver last week. Tackled at the 2 twice, and then like a drop. Not like Jameis missed him on a couple big throws that could have extended the game.
Yep.
Anyways,
I was just looking. The AFC is wild right now. Like it was so like elite and top heavy for a while there, and these quarterback injuries have just killed. I mean, if Lawrence is out long term, you got obviously Joe Burrow. Like some of these teams. I mean, Cincinnati's in last place right now. They're 6-6, but still kind of alive. Miami, Baltimore look great. Kansas City does not look great, but that they'll be there when it matters. But it's just interesting how this is the middle, like the seeds 3 through 6 in the AFC are just all kind of moving all over the place. Probably seeds 4 through 6, 4 through 7, I guess now with the playoffs, but they're all over the place. These last 4 weeks in the AFC are going to be wild. They seem to be moving around every single week. And I imagine everybody's just hoping, if you're an AFC team, you hope Buffalo doesn't get in. As a fan, I hope Buffalo gets in because I think that they're definitely one of the better teams. I think they're going to slide their way in with these other teams' struggles. But the AFC 4 through 7 is going to be a lot of fun this last month.
Yeah, I really hope Buffalo gets in too. They got to beat KC this week. I think they can.
I think they're going to, but it's hard to pick against the Chiefs at home, especially off a loss.
Yep. The Ravens, probably one of the better teams. They're on the slate, probably go a little bit forgotten about. With Mark Andrews out, Zay Flowers has a decent price tag. Isaiah Likely.
I was going to say they will not be forgotten at tight end, at least at this part of the podcast right here.
Yeah. What's the other? There was one more spot. Oh, the Jets. I could maybe play a Jet with Zach Wilson back. The news, it seems like Zach Wilson's going to start. I actually think that's the best option. I don't have any interest in the Jets if it's not Zach Wilson, which is funny to say, but those reports that like Zach Wilson didn't really want to come back into that was pretty funny. But
I would assume that was like written the wrong. I can't imagine a guy doesn't. I mean, it's hard to imagine a guy doesn't want to play, but if he doesn't, that's really bad. But I would imagine that report was kind of BS. But
yeah, you'd hope so.
You really, really hope so, because if that's the case, you got some big problems there. As if you don't already, but yeah.
But I would actually have a little bit of interest in Garrett Wilson. I think double-digit targets, and his salary is the cheapest it's been all season. Finally down there where he could have a big game at 5,500. So yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I've got a couple receivers like that we'll talk about later that, like, just because they're so cheap at this point, like, I'm like, oh, maybe I can finally get here. Garrett Wilson's one of them. There's another guy that's in the 4,000s that I think kind of falls into that same boat. But let's jump into talking players. But first, a note from our sponsors at Splash. RotoWire is proud to partner with Splash Sports for 2023 fantasy football season. Splash Sports empowers gaming commissioners to earn by creating contests. Commissioners can set up contests, add their style, and enjoy the evolving Splash Sports platform for customized preferences. From daily to season-long contests, Splash Sports caters to various playing styles such as DFS, Pick X, and traditional Survivor. And unlike traditional sportsbooks, Splash Sports pitch you against friends and family, not the house. Splash goes beyond betting, a space where friends can connect, strategize, and share in the excitement of sports. RotoWire will be running a weekly DFS tier contest on Splash Sports all football season long. Can you beat the RotoWire experts? Visit rotowire.com/splash to enter today. So, Ryan, I think we're in a week, definitely not like last week. We had the Chuck running back, the Zach Moss. He actually busted. I think he had 7.7 points. Did not work. He had 8 carries inside the 10, I think. No, yeah, it's goal to go to. It was wild. Every time I looked up, Zach Moss had a goal line carry. I'm like, oh, here we go. We're finally going to score. And it just never happened. But do you see anybody super popular this week? Before we jump into kind of talking quarterbacks and stacks, or anybody you're like, you know what, everybody's going to have this guy this week? I don't see a ton of them. I think DJ Moore and Isaiah Likely are probably the two, but do you see anybody that is super obvious this week that's going to be very high percentage?
Well, I think Zach Moss is going to be the most popular player again.
He's up to 5,900. I think you're right.
Yeah, the guys you said too, but for cash games, yeah, I think people are going to go right back to Moss, just because he didn't get priced up quite enough. You know, people will see all those touches he had inside the 10. Like you said, he still had 20 some touches. Yeah. And also this matchup against Cincy is, you know, above average. Cincy's defense is not very good. They've given up big games to running backs. You know, they're starting Jake Browning. People will see all that stuff. So yeah, I think Moss, I think he's probably, I'm comfortable playing him in cash games. I mean, he's basically the bell cow back for a favorite team, you know, priced under 6K with a lot of touchdown equity.
I figured with the bad game, they wouldn't price him up too much. I was hoping he'd be like kind of in the mid 6s with a lot of the other names to make it a little more interesting. But yeah, I think they underpriced him just because based on the fact he didn't deliver last week. But yeah, I think under 6,000 is just gonna be too cheap. I think you're right. I think a lot of people go back there, and it makes sense. You've heard a lot. I've read a lot of stuff this week, like, well, he had all the goal line carries. He had, 21 of 23 backfield touches, whatever it was. Yeah, he was clearly the guy that usage showed him as the guy. And I think that it's a good week that I think people will just go right back to. I agree there.
Yeah, you know, mid-high 6s would have been great because
there's a whole bunch of names in there. Yeah.
Yes, and his raw projection is actually higher than all the 6K guys. So people are just going to see that and click him for cash games. And yeah, it makes sense. But, you know, he'll get up to 50% in some tournaments, I'm pretty sure, again. And, you know, he makes
what was he in cash games, like your cash games last week? Do you remember?
Yeah, I think over 95, at least in the mid to higher stakes stuff. Yeah, wild.
Even we joked about we joked about it last week too. We're like, we always say, you know, stuff like, oh, it's gonna be super high, but I was like, that's gonna be the one. It's like actually gonna be in the 90s, and it was. That's wild.
Yeah, and even in tournaments, he was like 80% in some tournaments. So yeah, you mentioned he scored 7 points. I mean, what a great fade. So yeah, it's a similar thing this week, but I think just an easy play for cash games.
Yeah, I think so too. And then are there any other receivers? You know, I think DJ Moore will be the one that is that 6,000 range is kind of, there's not a ton of names in there. So I think that he's pretty obvious. I've seen a lot of people who like DJ Moore a lot this week. Is there anybody you think that is overly popular down in the cheap range? I think maybe if Elijah Moore, if Flacco plays, is there anybody you think that like everybody's going to have this guy yet again?
Yeah, I don't know about everybody, but seems like Drake London is catching some steam all the way down to 46.
That was my other name I teased right there.
Yeah, and it makes so much sense all the way down to 4,600.
I think there's enough Falcons hate in that offense and people that don't like Desmond. I don't know how. I think there'll be some ownership, but I don't think he'll be super high.
Right, I agree. So yeah, I don't think anyone's going to be super high. Maybe like 20% on someone like Drake London, but that's hot. I guess kind of high on a site like this.
For Drake London, that is pretty high. Is Isaiah likely going to be crazy high? Because I think that seemed pretty obvious at tight end to me.
Yeah, I don't think crazy high because there's other like Njoku will if Flacco plays will catch some ownership. Even Pitts, because Pitts is only 200 more than likely. It's kind of sort of the same thing with Drake London. The matchup against Tampa favors the passing game, so it might get a few more people on some of those cheap Falcons. But yeah, like I'm like you. I expected likely to be more popular than I think he'll end up being.
I actually like to hear that because I think that he seemed like a pretty good. Just slot him in at 3,500 and go with it. But your point on Pitts is good. I think I might just be jaded on Kyle Pitts at this point. Finally, it took me a long time to get to that point, but I think I'm just like, do I need the 3 for 42 and never anything else? And it's just he had 8 targets last week. I do get it. They were throwing him a bunch, but maybe people talked themselves into that. But I don't know. I've done it too many times, I think.
God, it never seems to work. I know I've done it too much too.
Yeah, I actually drafted him again this year too. As you can guess, that is not worked out as you wanted to. I took him, I think over Kittle and Goddard or something like that. Goddard hurt, but it was it's just so the offense is so bad. Arthur Smith is so bad. It's a bad combo of everything.
Yeah, I did. I fell for it again too, Scott. He just kept slipping in best ball. I think I got up to like 30% Kyle Pitts in best ball.
I actually don't think I don't think he's healthy either. You watch him run; he's got like a little bit of a hitch in his run. I don't think he's fully healthy either. Which is
funny. My brother always says that to me. It just looks like he's sort of jogging around out there, and like you watch, and that it does look like that. Yeah, he doesn't look healthy.
Yeah, and he just may have that one of those strides where it looks like he's not running hard. Like there's some guys that do that, they are, but obviously he's playing and trying hard. But it just seems like when he really like turns it on, there's a little bit of a limp in there, and I don't think it was this knee. I don't think the knee's fully healthy. But let's jump into quarterbacks. The favorite game stacks of the week. Who are you looking at? Are you into Josh Allen this week? Is it Mahomes on the other side? Are you Fields? Like where are you kind of falling for? You think is your favorite play this week?
Up top, it'd be Allen. I think the Bills win. Nice. They need to win. I like the Bills coming off a bye here. I think the Bills and Josh Allen play their best in these tougher spots. Allen was great against the Eagles in Philly last time out. He also ran more than he's run all season, and I think he will continue to run in the important games like this one. So, yeah, I just think Allen has the highest ceiling and, yeah, pretty good chance of hitting it. So I like Allen. I'm not sure. I think in cash games, like Fields or Purdy probably is the most expensive I would go. I think Fields and Purdy will probably be the most popular.
Do you worry on Purdy at all with the double-digit favorite that maybe they just run the ball down Seattle's throat the second half?
Yeah, I do. I don't want to play him in tournaments for that reason, probably.
Tournaments is tough, too, because, again, you mentioned it last week. Like with Deep, you just never know. They have so many weapons. You never know fully who to stack him with. It could be there's 3 pass catchers who can always work, and there's the best running back in the NFL. It's like the stacking part of Purdy is that he was huge last week. He worked obviously 4 touchdowns, 314 yards. But who to stack him with is always a call.
Yeah, it's like impossible. So you got to get that right, and then you got to hope that they don't blow him out. So yeah, I think it's tough to stack the 49ers, but
he's been a top 6 quarterback in 3 of the last 4 weeks. The one he wasn't was against Seattle. I don't know if that influences you at all.
Yeah, I don't know.
It was a Thursday night game. It was a night game on the road. Like I think that they'll be fine. I think that he'll be fine. My biggest concern would be the fact that if they do get up, maybe it's C-Mac, maybe it's Mitchell, maybe it's Jordan Mason, but they could run the ball a lot the second half if Seattle can't keep up.
Yeah, I have the same concerns. I don't see myself getting there in tournaments.
Yeah, I think I'd probably go Fields instead. I agree with you on Josh Allen. I think that you mentioned like must win, desperate spot, like superstars in a desperate spot. Like, oh, you always love that. Like, there's just no Kansas City's going to score in this game. I know Kansas City hasn't been scoring, but you mentioned all the injuries in the Buffalo D. I think KC. I think this game will get pretty back and forth. Casey Pasty's been really good, but you mentioned Jordan Love was really good against them. 267 yards, 3 touchdowns last week. Got a couple injuries there. Allen's been a top 6 quarterback in 7 of the last 9 weeks. Like top 6, that's elite stuff. He is 8,300. Do you play him with Diggs if you play him? Like, do you play him with Gabe Davis, who had a really good game last week? Starting Allen Diggs gets really expensive really fast.
Very tough. Yeah. That's the tough part with the Bills. Because even before it had been Kincaid that you at least felt best about, but Dawson Knox has been practicing fully all week. I'm pretty sure he's going to get activated for this game. It makes me worry about just can Kincaid see enough usage to put up a ceiling for 5,500? I guess we don't know. I don't know how much Knox is going to get used, but yeah, it makes me worried. And then Diggs, that's 8,800 is a lot for Diggs, especially when you pair him with Allen. Especially when you see Diggs, he hasn't had a 100-yard game since week 6.
It's a crazy stat because I think he had 4 in the first 5 weeks.
It's a crazy stat. Like, do we want to look too much into that? He's kind of always been inconsistent, though. I don't know. Yeah, Gabe Davis. No one wanted to touch Gabe Davis, and look, 12 targets, 105 yards, and a touchdown. I think I could play Gabe Davis.
Gabe Davis could have 145 yards in this game or 6, and I don't think anybody's surprised either way. Like he's probably the most polarizing one in terms of like he could be great, he could be terrible.
Didn't he have that massive 4 touchdown game against the Chiefs?
That was the 13-second game where Kansas City scored at the end. He had the last touchdown too. Like it was game-winning touchdown in a playoff game to top off one of the best receiver games ever, and nobody remembers because of the 13-second Kelsey stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so all that being said, I don't think it's crazy to play Josh Allen naked.
Oh, interesting.
We saw he was on all the winning lineups against Philadelphia, and on most of them he was with no pass catchers because people didn't really play Gabe Davis. So at least in the smaller field stuff, you didn't have to have Gabe Davis because Allen has so much rushing upside too. And
he has rushing touchdowns in 5 of the last 6 games.
It's unbelievable. Yeah. So Diggs can have like 8 for 80 and a touchdown, and he scores 22 fantasy points, and you might not want or need that for 8,800, but it still helps Josh Allen get there. So yeah, I don't hate that this week with Allen. It's tough to know who to pair him with.
So what? Talk to me real quick about the other side. Like if there's going to be back and forth, that means that Patrick Mahomes is going to be involved. He's 7,900. We mentioned outside the top 12 quarterbacks in 4 of the last 5 weeks. 2 really great weeks all year. He struggled with pressure. Buffalo does get a lot of pressure. They've been injured, but they still get a lot of pressure with the quarterback. What do you do with Mahomes at 7,900 here? If we think this is going to be back and forth, Mahomes is going to have to be involved. I love Rashee Rice this week. One of my favorite plays at receiver. I'm going to have a lot of Rashee Rice either way. Can you play Mahomes, and how much less popular is he going to be than Allen?
Yeah, you just said it. Rashee Rice is my favorite play from the Chiefs. I agree with you there. I don't know if I can get to Mahomes.
I kind of like it. I think in a game like this where you get Patrick Mahomes at half of what Josh Allen is ownership wise, I really like making the play. And I think you can go, if you wanted to get tricky, you go Mahomes with Rice, and you can play Diggs if you're doing it. You play Gabe Davis too. But if you play Rice, I think you get to Diggs that way. It gets really expensive. Mahomes Diggs is almost as expensive as Allen Diggs, but I think it's I really like playing Mahomes this week. I think it's a way to get different with a superstar stud in the highest price in the highest total game.
Yeah, I agree with you. What about Kelsey? Do you have any interest in Mahomes Kelsey?
I mean, that's kind of your Allen Diggs problem. It's just a lot. It's just really, really expensive. You can never get away from Travis Kelsey being awesome. I mean, he was quiet last week and still had 80 yards. So it's just one of those things. He could score 2 or 3 times any week. I think I'd probably do it with Rice and use the money elsewhere. But yeah, if you want to go Mahomes Kelsey, like I'm never going to argue against that. If you're playing Mahomes, playing Kelsey is obviously an option you want to consider. Okay,
and how do you feel about James Cook if you have a Chiefs stack? I mean, I think it was interesting to see him catch 6 balls on 7 targets last week and 16 carries. I mean, the last few weeks, clearly, it seems like he's the number one guy who's going to catch some passes. 6K is kind of interesting.
I love it. I think he's an interesting, different player from Moss. Interesting to play both of them if you want to get expensive elsewhere. Since the new offensive coordinator came in, they fired Ken Dorsey. He has 20 plus touches in both those games. Was like I think that's the key stat. Well, you look at the yards. He has over 100 total yards in 3 straight games, but I think the touches is the key. Like they're obviously using him differently. He had one 20 plus touch game with Dorsey, so whatever that is through 11 weeks or 10 weeks, and then I guess it'd be 10 weeks, and then 2 since 20 plus touches. Yeah, I think James Cook in a game like this is super, super interesting. It's definitely someone I'm playing.
Yeah, me too. And you mentioned pairing him with someone like Moss frees up the salary to play the rest of that game. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, suddenly you can play Diggs. You could play Jefferson if you want. There's just a lot of things you could do if you would go Moss Cook, and obviously Moss will be popular. You could Cook instead of Moss and go somewhere else and kind of fade that spot too. And it's a pretty easy swap there. But yeah, I like Mahomes, Rice, and James Cook a lot. I think that's a start that I will probably definitely entertain right there. What about lower, less popular quarterbacks, cheaper quarterbacks? We have Jake Browning. You mentioned really good last week. He's 5,200 against Indy in a game that kind of middle total. Josh Dobbs is 5,900. Gets Justin Jefferson back. He was really rough last game with the 4 interceptions. He was legit bad in that game, but he's a top 15 quarterback in 5 straight before that. Anybody down here in the cheap range you're thinking about actually playing? Kind of below the Purdy Fields guys.
I'm thinking about taking a chance on Browning. I think you could take a chance on Minshew too. Just sort of the same reason with Moss being chalk. And if you wanted to pair him with Pittman or even Downs, I don't know if I'll do that. I think just Browning and Chase is interesting. I mean, he's 5,200 Browning. So if he can get you 20 in Chase, yeah, it might be enough. Like, I don't know even how much he really needs.
I mean, you're saving 3,000 from Allen and Mahomes with that. I mean, it's a huge chunk.
Right.
And then you look at the value per point in our projections. Like he's right there with Allen. He's pretty close in whatever projection you look at. If he just gets to 17, 18, 19 points, like that works.
Yeah, it works if the guy that it allows you to spend up for crushes,
Right. If you play McCaffrey or something like that, you can see how it works.
Right. It makes it pretty easy to play McCaffrey. You could even play like a Travis Kelce in that lineup. So I do have some interest there. I don't know. He was so good against the Jags. I was hoping to not have interest and just be one more spot to cross off. But I mean, looks like a pretty good spot for them if he's, going to be as good as he was last game or even close to it. I mean,
Yeah, and you can really build an interesting lineup that's very different this week too, because a lot of people play Josh Allen, a lot of Justin Fields. Like they're just you can get to guys that you can't get to in this lineup. You play Allen and Diggs, you're not playing McCaffrey. If you play Mahomes and Kelce, you're not playing McCaffrey. If you play Fields and Moore, you can get to McCaffrey, so that's probably a different way. But I think it lets you kind of get to a couple of those higher price guys that is hard to get to otherwise.
Yeah, I agree.
Anybody else quarterback-wise before we move on to running backs? Lamar Jackson, 7,700, but I think that's hard to get to in this game. Is there anybody else that you're thinking about?
Yeah, no, I know we mentioned at the start, but I want to play some Fields. So I think I'll just use the rest of my lineups on Fields.
I think if you look at the value and per the money, I think he kind of grades out as the top projection-wise guy pretty much in most things I've seen.
Yes, and he'll be relatively popular, but nothing crazy.
I hated their game plan against Minnesota, so I don't even know. He threw so many screens in that game; it got to be funny. It was what do you do? Even when they needed chunks of yards, he would throw a pass behind the line of scrimmage. It was weird. The rushing yards have been there the last couple of weeks since he's been back. I mean, you need those because he's not throwing for a lot of yards. It's just you hope he throws them all to DJ Moore if you play DJ Moore, and then you hope he runs for 110 yards and scores. But you mentioned the Detroit defense struggling so much; they were allowing almost 9 yards per target the last 6 weeks. Fields was wide receiver 8 when they played last time. He had 104 yards rushing. It all kind of works. I don't think it's as safe as people think, though, because the passing upside's so low. But yeah, I mean, you got a guy that can run for 100 yards pretty easily. It's tough not to get there.
Yeah, you said it perfectly. I guess I would just add, I maybe have a little interest in Cole Kmet. I've just seen enough now, enough games from him, enough 2 touchdown games from him. He can catch a lot of short passes. That's fine. I mean, he's only 4,300. Catch a bunch of short passes like last week and just get into the end zone. Yeah, I agree. It's not quite as safe. Here's the stat I read. The Lions just lost their best interior pass rusher, Alim McNeil. He had the highest sack rate on the team, ranked second in pressures. I mean, one of their best players. So coming off a bye, I like everything about the spot for the Bears. Actually, I was checking the weather. It's going to be like right around freezing, 32, 33. Not great, but no rain or wind, it looks like. So
yeah. I think as long as it's clear and there's no precipitation, I think that the cold at that point you're probably good with that.
Yeah.
Let's jump into other positions here. First note from our sponsors at Circa. Get ready for the ultimate big game party at Circa Resort and Casino. Super Sundays in Las Vegas this year. Watch the big game poolside at Stadium Swim's big game viewing party. Massive screen, booming game sound, and a view of the pyrotechnic and visual effects throughout the game. Snag the best seat in the sun with day beds, poolside boxes, cabanas, and more. Or touchdown at the world's largest sportsbook, Circa Sports, for the big game bash. 3 stories of football glory featuring a 78 million pixel screen. Book your seat with a variety of reservation options, including bottle service, open bar, stadium-style food, and more. Don't miss these legendary viewing experiences on February 11th. The big game parties only at Circa Resort and Casino. Reserve today at circalasvegas.com. So, Ryan, as we've talked about some of these other positions, we've mentioned a bunch of the running backs here, so we'll fire through some guys here. In the expensive range, we mentioned Christian McCaffrey. He's 9,200 against Seattle. Leads the NFL in touchdowns, touches, and rush yards. Just been huge pretty much all year long. Only one game he hasn't scored in. There's not a lot of interesting expensive running backs, though. He's 9,200. Alvin Kamara coming off the 2 touchdown games, 8,200. Kyron Williams, who's been balling out, is 7,300. I'm not sure there's much more above 7,000. I guess if you wanted to go Travis Etienne, but he's a little banged up, and they're playing the Browns. Austin Eckler at 7,600. Like, I don't think anybody's going there at this point. He's been really inefficient. What are you doing expensive running backs? Are you playing McCaffrey? Are you trying to get there? What are you doing here?
Yeah, McCaffrey just really stands out. You mentioned I don't have really any interest in the guys directly below him. For cash games, for sure. I think you just start McCaffrey Moss. You can afford it. McCaffrey, he crushed the Seahawks last time. 114 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's got at least 20 fantasy points in 6 straight. We don't have Tyreek Hill to spend for on this slate. And you're not going to be playing like Diggs in cash or Jefferson in cash, or even Kelsey in cash. So you got to spend somewhere. It's really easy to just start McCaffrey Moss in cash games, I think.
Yeah, home game, a big favorite. I think McCaffrey's pretty kind of speaks for himself. What about Kyron Williams? 7,300 at Baltimore. You see at Baltimore, you're like, but 24 of the 25 running back touches last week. They're using him a ton, 112 total yards and a touchdown after the huge game. We had over 40 fantasy points the week before. Kyron Williams played 8 games here. 6 of them are as an RB1, so a top 12 running back in 6 of the 8 games. Tough matchup, like I said, but he's been great.
Yeah, he's been awesome. He's absolutely carrying me in best ball.
Oh, nice. You got a lot of him?
I got a lot of him for like
Beautiful.
25%, I think. Fortunate enough to have been taking him in the 20th round when I could.
He came back for you just in time.
Yes. And I can just use it as a hedge in my mind, at least. You mentioned like this is a tough spot on the road against Baltimore and a low total. So I don't feel like I think
Baltimore was on bye last week too, right?
Yes, it's not a spot.
They're rested. Yeah, it's tough.
It's not a spot where you see him putting up a ceiling game too often. So I think I'm okay fading that. I'd rather take a shot on like Josh Jacobs, I think.
Yeah, I was gonna say we mentioned before with Moss. There's a lot of guys in the 6,000s. There's a ton of them in here. I'm not gonna list them all off. But what are you going to Jacobs? Who else do you like in this range? Because there are probably 4 or 5 guys giving a pretty good case for in the 6,000s.
Yeah, I haven't been on Jacobs much, but I find myself wanting to roster him this week.
Me too, and I don't think I've played him in like 2 years.
Yeah, okay, so we have kind of the same feeling. I like he's just so much usage. It's a nice home matchup coming off a bye, and with Antonio Pierce and sort of the new coaching staff there, They want to run him the ball. He's going to get touches. Yeah, it's a good spot. I like Jacobs, I think.
I do too. I know that he's not been explosive. I think he's last in the NFL in carries over 10 yards, but I think Antonio Pierce point is the key one. Like, they've been openly saying they're going to feed him, and they backed it up. They have fed him the ball a lot. Minnesota's tough against the run, 3.6 yards per carry. So I think it's one of those games where I don't think you're going to have an efficient game, but I think you're going to have a volume game. Should be a good game script, kind of a close game indoors. I think it just kind of sets up for Josh Jacobs to be super involved. And anytime you get under 7,000, someone's super involved, it's kind of hard not to like that. What about right below him? We talked a lot about Rachaad White last week. He delivered again, 106 total yards and a touchdown. He has, I think he has 98 yards or more in like 5, 6, 8 days, whatever the stat is. He had 99 yards against Atlanta in week 7, who they play this week, but he needed the reception. He had 6 catches that week. No running back has a rush touchdown against Atlanta this season.
Wow.
Does that seem impossible?
What a stat.
I think it's actually true too. I saw the stat. Okay. I'm scrolling down the game log, and I see 0 rushing touchdowns against Atlanta all season.
I mean,
by a running back, I should say.
Yeah, I don't really want to bet that Rachaad White's going to be the first, especially now that he's so expensive. I mean, he's gotten big price hikes now, all the way up to $6,800. I've been playing a lot of Rachaad White. I like Rachaad White, but I think I can avoid that game environment. Atlanta wants to slow it down. That stat you just mentioned. I don't know. I just kind of prefer other guys, I guess. Definitely prefer Jacobs. Maybe even prefer Bijan on the other side. I don't know what to think about Pacheco. He hasn't practiced yet, but he's in that game. I don't know. What do you think about that top range?
I really like going back to Bijan. I think that he played 75% of the snaps last week, the highest since week 6. I know it wasn't very efficient, but it was against the Jets, who do have a good defense. He was 18-53. But you look at the last 3 games, 23, 19, and 21 touches. I think that's the whole key of this thing, is that they have finally. It's not the massive percentage of snaps we want, but see, when he's playing, he's getting touches, 20 touches a game. You give me that with Bijan, it's pretty nice. They're home favorite, so a nice game script. The Falcons did really well against Tampa in the first game against them. You remember that was the game that Bijan was sick and nobody knew about it, but they had I think Tyler Algier, everybody else, like the other 3 running backs all did really well against Tampa. They had a whole bunch of yards. Tampa's allowed top 10 games to running backs in 3 straight games. Chuba Hubbard was 104 yards and 2 touchdowns last week. I think the spot's great. I think the matchup's great. I think the game script is great. I like Bijan a lot at 6,500. I know that we always run the risk of him getting 12 touches and us being frustrated, but I think they've changed that a little bit. I think you get 20 touches in this game. I think it's a really good spot, and the price is about right. I think I'm playing some Bijan for sure this week at 65.
Yeah, I think I am too. I think you broke it down perfectly.
What about below him? We got Zach Moss, James Cook down here. We also have Joe Mixon down here off 2 touchdowns. What are you doing in the cheaper running backs? Is it an easy Moss for you, or you're thinking about some other guys down here?
Yeah, I think Moss is a fine option. I was thinking about the Detroit guys.
I was gonna say, sell me on one of those, because I'd love to hear how you can figure that out, because I can't.
I don't think I can, Scott. I mean, I was trying to force it when making field stacks, just because it made sense. But
Gibbs is 6,600, Montgomery 6,400. I think Montgomery had more snaps last week, but I just feel like you have to nail how the game goes to figure it out. Like, if they get behind, it'll be Gibbs catch a pass. If they get ahead, it's Montgomery running. But it's hard to figure out. They're just splitting so much down the middle.
They have too many guys on the Lions now. Every week, I think there's 2 running backs, Laporta in there now to sort of mess with St. Brown.
Yep.
It's tough. Revenge game for Montgomery, I guess. I don't know. He had 17, 18 points, touchdown in 4 straight. I don't know. I guess you could take a chance on him, but yeah, it's tough for me to pick one. Mixon, I was looking at Mixon, 2 touchdowns, 25 touches against the Jags, 6 catches. I hate playing Mixon. I really do. And it never seems to work out. I don't know. I don't know if I can get there. I kind of like Josh Cook James Cook more. We mentioned him already. I don't know what do you think about this range?
Man, I hate playing Joe Mixon too. I don't know why. And the interesting thing with Mixon is like Chase Brown's starting to play a little more too. I think Mixon's like snap count is going a little bit lower last few weeks. I can't do it. And with if he was like the only option down here, I could probably talk myself into it. But with Cook and Moss right there, I think I just play one of those two guys instead. Can be a revenge game for David Montgomery if they already played the Bears this season.
This one's in Chicago, so
there you go.
You know,
revenge return home. I see what you're doing there. I just really like Cook. I kind of talked about it earlier, but 100 plus yards, 3 straight games, 20 plus touches last 2. The key for me is he's like playing near the goal line too. Like he had a couple goal line touches. They were going with Murray pretty quickly at those spots with Dorsey, and I think that they've moved away from that. The Chiefs are allowing 4.8 yards per carry. Like it's a good matchup too, plus the highest total. I think Cook's my favorite running back down here. I think I like him more than Moss. I'll play some Moss too, but I like the Cook-Moss combo. I like McCaffrey-Cook, McCaffrey-Moss, whatever you want to do there. But I like Cook a lot this week. I think if you get the ball in a guys like that hand in a game like this with a talented offense and a high-scoring back-and-forth game, I think Cook just kind of has to fall into some points.
Good. I feel the same way. I was kind of hoping you would say that. I'm just looking below 6K. I don't know if you have any interest in the 5K range.
Chuba Hubbard's balling right now.
He is balling. Wow, 25 for 104 against the Bucks. Yeah,
he's out touching Miles Sanders by a lot.
Yeah, I don't know if I could do that. I was what like Jerome Ford. What about Jerome Ford if Trevor Lawrence is out?
Nothing about that game really fired me up. I looked at it. I think he had a touchdown on the first drive last week, but
yeah, he caught one.
Are we over Javonte Williams at 5,800?
Oh man, I'm kind of over it. But
the percentage of running back touches are going down the last 4 games, and I think that's enough to probably keep me away. And just the fact that you've got Moss and Cook and even Mixon right ahead of him, I don't think I can get there either. I think there's just too many options down here for me to do it.
He doesn't have a rushing touchdown this year.
Wow, that's a stat too.
That's a stat too.
Zero. Is he due? There we go. I think I've lost a lot of money on is he due over the last few years. I think mostly on Kyle Pitts and a little bit on Deontay Johnson. But yeah, the is he due has not done well lately.
What about I guess the last one is Charbonnet if Kenneth Walker's out at 5,400. You have any thoughts?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think it's a tough matchup. But yeah, if he's out, Charbonnet was a little banged up too, right?
Yeah. I guess you never know. Those Seattle guys are always questionable.
Yeah, that's true. He's questionable. Yeah, I mean, the obvious concern is that they get behind and they don't run the ball very much. But, he catch the ball in the backfield too. Yeah, I think if Walker's out, which I think he's going to be, and Charbonnet plays, I think that 5,400, anytime you get a starting running back who's talented, 5,400, that works. I don't know. I'm probably not getting there in the matchup, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me either, I don't think.
Let's talk some receivers here. We've kind of mentioned a lot of them as we've gone through these games here. Expensive at the top range. We have 4 guys I think that are in play at over 8,000. Stephon Diggs 8,800, Keenan Allen 8,600, Justin Jefferson off the injury, he's back finally, is 8,500, and then Amon-Ra St. Brown 8,200. You mentioned Laporta kind of stole some of his thunder last week. Still had a touchdown. Still has 95 yards or a touchdown every game this season, so he's still been really good. But I do get your point. They have a lot of weapons right now, and they kind of are mixing and matching. 4 guys over 8,000. Do you have a very strong favorite among the group or not?
Unfortunately, no.
I don't really either.
I was kind of hoping you did. I don't have a strong Justin Jefferson take either, coming off the injury and with Dobbs there now.
My note on him was, can you play him at 8,500 with Josh Dobbs?
I mean, I don't think I can, to be honest. But I don't know. Maybe that's what a lot of people are thinking.
I think if the weather looks okay, Amon-Ra is probably my favorite out of the group. He's the cheapest, but just so consistent every week. I mean, the problem with Diggs is that the Chiefs have been really good against wide receiver ones. Devontae Adams has the most yards of wide receiver one against them, 73 yards this year. Like, they've been really good against ones that the twos have gotten them. So if you want to talk yourself into Gabe Davis, is probably the way to do it. You mentioned Diggs and them 100 yards since week 6. It's hard because all these guys have tough matchups. Like Keenan Allen, the Broncos have been really good against wide receivers. I know Nico Collins had 191 yards to burst that bubble last week, but they haven't been good. The Bears have only given up 100 yards to a receiver once all year. That's Mike Evans. So the Amon-Ra St. Brown, that gets tough there. They all are in spots where they're really expensive. They're fully priced, and they're in matchups we don't love. So it's a weird week with 8,000s. You can kind of talk yourself out of all of them.
Yeah, I agree, like 100%. That's
I'm gonna play some digs with some Allen as I do it probably, and with cheap running backs available. But yeah, none of these are like, oh, this is a great spot, both matchup wise and talent wise.
Yep, I agree. And also, I do like the Diggs Allen combo, though. I don't think many people are going to do it. It's tough to do. Which is why it makes sense.
Yeah, if that's not very popular and people go Allen naked or Allen with Davis or Kincaid, I think it gets really intriguing because, I mean, he's still Stephon Diggs.
I'm with you.
7,000s. There are a lot of names in here. I mentioned that the 6,000s is a little meager this week. That's why DJ Moore will be so popular. But there are a lot of guys in the 7,000s. Mike Evans, Jamar Chase, Pittman, another monster target game. Nico Collins, I mentioned him, monster game. No Tank Dell. He's clearly the number one now. Devontae Adams. Both the Rams are in here. Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. Olave, 7,000. This is a stacked range this week. How are you kind of parsing through this range and figure out who you want to play?
Yeah, it's a stacked range.
By the way, Mike Evans has been awesome.
We said it last week.
Yeah.
Love Mike Evans. Awesome. Played him last week. Yeah, I'll start with Mike Evans. I didn't think I would initially have interest, but I have some interest if AJ Terrell's going to be out.
Yep.
I mean, he's one of the better cornerbacks in the league. Concussion last week. I don't know. He's one of those questionable. He's in the concussion protocol. I don't know. I haven't seen, but yeah, if he was out, it's a big game for Tampa. They're still in the playoff hunt. I think I could play some Evans. I do like Chase mentioned. I was hoping not to have to play Chase in these Bengals anymore. But they brought his salary back down 7,600. I mean, look, can Chase equal what the guys in the 8K range do? I think so. If Browning is anywhere near as good as he was against the Jags. I mean, Chase is just so good. I always like rostering Chase. So yeah, I have some interest there. And then Pittman. I played some Pittman last week. It worked out well. I can't believe how consistent he's been when I looked at the numbers. He has at least 8 catches in 9 of 12 games this year.
And 5 in a row.
Yeah, I mean, that looks pretty good. You just know he's going to get a bunch of targets. It's a good matchup. Minshew loves throwing to him. So, yeah, I have some interest in Pittman. I'm not sure what to do with these other guys. I don't know. Who stands out for you?
Yeah, it's interesting because we talked about in the 8,000s. It's like, well, we love these guys. They're expensive and tough matchups. And it's kind of the opposite in 7,000s. Like Jamar Chase, the Colts are 26th in points to wide receiver ones. Bengals struggle against wide receivers, so it's a good spot for Michael Pittman. You mentioned AJ Terrell. I was going to mention that. He's in the concussion protocol. He did practice, but he's got to finish all those 5 steps. So it's going to, one of those things that probably comes up to right to game time. Not many guys have cleared, though. I know Brock Purdy famously did in that game, but not a lot of guys have cleared that in a week. So it's tough there. So all 3 of those guys in good spots, have been playing well. I mean, you mentioned the targets on Pittman. 12 plus targets and 5 of 7 is a massive number. We always talk about 8, 9, 10 targets. We're talking 12 plus. He had 16 targets last week. I mean, just this Minshew clearly just locks in on him, which maybe not great NFL wise, but you love that fantasy wise. Nico Collins is tough because Tank Dell's not going to play. He's a huge boom guy. He's 140 yards 3 times this year. He has 31% of the targets on plays where Tank Dell's not in the field. So it's a huge target monster with no Dell. But man, the Jets are tough against wide receiver ones. They're 3rd in points to opposing wide receiver ones. They've allowed 3 touchdowns to wide receivers all year, which is a pretty crazy stat too. We talk about crazy stats. It's a pretty good one against all wide receivers. So I love Nico Collins as a player. I like him as in this option with no Tank Dell, but I just think Pittman, Chase, and Evans are both better options this week. Or all 3 better options this week. I can't get there. The Rams guys, there's no way I'm playing Cooper Kupp at 7,400. At some point, he's gonna have a big week, but 6 straight games under 50 yards. I'm not paying 7,400 for him no matter what. So I think that gets me down to Olave, who I think is really a good option again this week. With Jameis, I'm fine with that. Carolina's been pretty good against wide receiver ones, but mostly because you don't have to pass against them. Evans smoked him last week. Winston's targeted him a lot when they've played. You look at the stats, and Winston definitely looks at him. 119 on 8 targets last week. You mentioned could have been like an 8-200 kind of game, with a couple touchdowns in there. So I think I'm skipping I'm going those kind of high 7,000 guys, then skipping all the way down to Olave at $7,000.
Yep, I agree with all of that. I like Olave, Pittman too, kind of. Pittman's looked really good out there. Yeah. I guess just that he looks like a number one receiver,
It's hard to click him over Chase at the same price just based on like what's in our head. But I mean, those targets those are real, and those are every single week.
Yep.
So how about the 6,000s? I mentioned it's a little meager in here. There's definitely not as many names. DJ Moore, 6,500. I think we mentioned him enough. He's obviously a top 10 receiver in all 4 games that Justin Fields has played this year. 44.5% of the air yards when Fields plays, which is a insane number. He has 40% of the Bears air yards when Fields plays. We've got both Niners guys in here. Ayuk 69, Debo 68. We have DK Metcalf off the huge game, 6,700. Cortland Sutton down here at 6,100. I do like that too. What are you doing in the 6,000s? Those are the only 5 names that really kind of even seem playable to me.
Yeah, I agree. Really like DJ Moore. I'll play him where I play Fields. I'll fade. I think I'll probably just fade him he's going to be popular if I don't have Fields. I mean, I'll probably just fade DJ Moore. To be honest, I could fade this whole range. The Niners, obviously the Niners guys are good options. Just like Purdy's a good option, but everything we said about that game, if I'm not going to, I don't know. I just don't want to try to pick and choose.
What about DK?
Yeah, I don't think I can do DK either. The Niners shut him down last time.
They did. He has 90-plus yards in 3 of the last 4, but he had 32 yards in that game. With Charvarius Ward, the best game he played as a Niner was that week, but he had 9 targets. Like, if you give me 9 targets again, I think I kind of risk that. I think that if we think the Niners are going to be winning, which we kind of do, we talked about McCaffrey, we talked about the receivers a lot with the Niners, and that's a concern. I mean, that means Geno's throwing the whole second half. I think that a lot of people will look at that game with Ward. It was on national TV Thanksgiving night and be like, I just don't want to play him against the Niners. I like DK this week, 6,700. I think the targets will be there. You give me targets with DK anytime. I don't care who's guarding him. I'm going to take that. I think DK has a good game this week.
I think that's a good gamble. I don't think anyone's going to play DK.
That's part of why I really like it. I think that I think that everybody's been talking about that with that Ward game, and he shadowed him. It was like everybody's talking about that. I think it's a really nice spot to get an insanely talented guy under 7,000 in a game where Geno's going to have to throw the ball a ton.
Yeah, that's a good call. No one's going to play him. No one's going to play him. I mean, you got DJ Moore right under him.
Yep.
Those got 7K guys we just talked about, Olave, Pittman, people will want to get up there. You got the Niners that people will play over Metcalf. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I do also like Cortland Sutton down here. We had a weird game last week, only 2 catches, but 77 yards and a touchdown, kind of what he does. He scored 9 of 12 games. The Chargers have struggled against wide receiver 1. So if you're going to play anyone, the Broncos Chargers, we mentioned that total's kind of in the middle, but I think if I'm playing anyone in the game, it's Cortland Sutton.
Yeah, I get it. I hate that he's all the way up to 6,100.
Yeah. I think he was 54 last week. That's a big jump.
Yeah. So that's kind of annoying. He despite 9 touchdowns this season, he still doesn't go over 20 fantasy points.
Yeah.
He did it one time against Miami.
For 140 yards every week, that'll tend to happen.
Yeah. So I agree though. It's a great matchup. I mean, it's a good spot. Just don't like the price jump.
We have a lot of cheap guys, but in the 5,000s, there are not many names in here either. It's kind of a lot of guys in the 7s, a lot of guys in the 4s. But I mentioned earlier, I love Rashee Rice in this range, 5,400. The last 2 games, what I'm kind of looking at, 8 for 107, a touchdown on 10 targets, and 8 for 64 on 9 targets. Over 30% target share the last 2 weeks. They've clearly decided that he is their best receiver. Mahomes trusts him. Andy Reid trusts him. I just think that they're going to drop plays for him. I think it's almost impossible for me to get away from Rice at 5,400. I love this spot. He's probably I think you said it before too. I think it's my favorite receiver play this week. 5,400 is too cheap. When I clicked on his name, I was hoping it was going to be cheap. I think that's too cheap. I think it's going to be popular, but I love him this week. I think it's kind of a slot him in play and move on.
Yeah, I think I agree with all that. I think he's Good enough for cash games, even. Yeah, probably the best in the 5K range. So yeah, we're on the same page there. The other guy I'm going to take a chance on is Garrett Wilson. Briefly mentioned it at the start. Look, I get it if everyone out there is completely done with the Jets. I think I could see Zach Wilson having a decent game on Sunday. And I'll take 10 plus targets to Garrett Wilson at 5,500.
Yeah, you get insane talent and targets in that price. I think it just kind of makes sense. I will probably play Rice over him, but he makes a really interesting swap on Rice. He'll be way more popular, I think.
Yeah, and I will play Rice over him as well on, in cash and on a lot of my lineups. But I just, it makes sense to take a chance on.
I also think both might be an option there. I think that you can play both pretty easily and make an interesting lineup. I like that. Talk to me about cheap receivers here. There are some names in the 4,000s I really do like. We mentioned Drake London earlier. Just kind of talent at his price. Kind of the similar to Garrett Wilson argument, but really good matchup. Tampa Bay struggles against wide receiver ones. He had 7 targets. He was only 554 against them the first week. I know the offense is just rough to get behind, but I think he makes sense this week at 4,600. Who else do you like to hear in the cheaper range? There's not as many names, but I feel like they're pretty good ones.
I feel like there's some pretty good ones too. I don't know. I think it makes sense to go back to Downs. After he let a lot of people. He was pretty popular last week and let a lot of people down. But it's a good spot. If it doesn't go to Pittman, should go to Downs. I guess we can talk about. Pierce has 6 targets in back-to-back games, coming off a 100-yard game last week. But I still like Downs for 4,900. Kind of like Judy for the same reasons you mentioned about Sutton. I get it if people are just done with Judy. I mean, that seems okay too. He's another guy who just seems like he doesn't have a ceiling in him. He's just not getting the targets. Russ is just not throwing for a lot of yards, but it is a good matchup. Yeah, you mentioned London. London's a good play. Elijah Moore would be my favorite. I said it at the start. Just if Flacco plays and Amari Cooper's out, got to say all those things. If Amari Cooper plays, I have no interest in Moore. But if Cooper's out and Flacco's in, I mean, that's double-digit targets for Moore again. I
like those two. There is a guy down here that I really, really like this week, and it kind of goes in the same argument I made earlier for another receiver. But
Jackson.
Jackson Smith and Jigba at 4,100, I think, is probably is the best cheap play down here. And we talked about DK. If Charvarius Ward does follow him again, to which it works so well, he will. So while I like DK, like 2,600 less to Jackson Smith and Jigba, big dog, all the same stuff. Gia's going to throw the ball second half. He had 11 targets last week, and he is really talented. I think they're finally figuring out that he is really talented. He was only 2 for 31 against Niners last game, but like afterwards, he made that one-handed catch on the sideline that we saw. And after the game, Pete Carroll's like, dude, he's talented. We got the ball more. I think they're going to focus on him. 11 targets last game. 4,100 is just too cheap for a guy with this talent and involved in the offense in a great game script game. I love JSN at 4,100 this week. I'm going to play him in a ton of spots.
Perfect breakdown. I like him too. I'm going to play him too. I think it makes a lot of sense, even like just paired with McCaffrey and Smith and Jigba.
I think I really like DK at the price week, but I think I'll probably play less than I want to just because I'm going to play JSN so many spots. I think it's going to be just the money savings, the talent, the game script. It all works out really, really well. This is JSN week. I think 4,100 is pretty much pretty close to a slam dunk for me.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Anyone in the threes you like? We got Jonathan Mingo here again. He was we talked about him last week. He worked. He was 6 for 69 and 10 targets. Very involved in 4 straight games. The new coaching staff seems to want to get him involved. I like him at 3,500. Are there any other uber cheap receivers you like this week?
Yeah, I was going to bring up Mingo. It was a nice call by you on Mingo last week. Yeah, I think you can go back to Mingo for 3,500 for sure. Anyone else? I don't know. I think Shakir isn't the worst if you're playing Josh Allen. I mean, he's out there a ton, and he's been catching deep balls. He has at least a 23-yard reception in 5 straight. I mean,
wow,
I don't know.
That's a stat too.
It's kind of an obscure stat, but anyway, he's at least out there, and Josh Allen's his quarterback, and 3,900. I guess I don't mind it.
He's played over 40 snaps on offense last 5 weeks. You're right. He's just out there, which in a game like this, like out there, kind of counts.
Pretty good, yeah. And Yeah, so I don't mind that.
You mentioned how much you like Zach Wilson this week, and he's Xavier Gibson love. He's a lot more involved now.
I don't know if I can do that.
You don't love Zach Wilson that much.
No,
he had 5 for 77 and 6 catches, 6 targets last week. He's played over 40 snaps in 5 straight games. I think he's just a kind of a shifty guy. He had the punt return touchdown in week 1 against the Bills. I think they do like him. At 3,100, I think that he's a fine punt play if you want to hope he gets 6 targets again.
Yeah, that makes sense actually. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't have much else to add. What about, I don't know, like I was going to bring up Odell Beckham against his former club.
Yeah, I think that's, I think if you want to get down here at 3,000, he's been pretty involved recently. I don't think that's a terrible play either. I think, you're always just looking for, targets on the field at this price. I think he's a fine option there too. I think I'd probably play Mingo instead of him, but
I would too. I remember it must have been that game against Cincy, one of the night games. He actually looked better physically, like quick and fast for the first time in a long time. So I just remember
he had a slant he caught, and he like broke away, and you're like, oh, that's the place he used to make on the Giants. Like you could see a little bit of that come through finally.
Yeah. Anyway.
We got a bit long, kind of breaking down everything in depth, but tight ends. Kelsey, we mentioned, is 7,800. Laporta and Hawkinson are kind of in the same range of the low 6s. Kittle's right there in that range. So it's kind of Laporta, Hawkinson, Kittle, Kincaid, and Taysom Hill in the mid-5s below them, and then a bunch of cheap guys. What did you do at tight end this week? Because I did not love a lot of the options aside from just going down to Isaiah Likely at 3,500.
Yeah, I like going down to Likely. I would like Njoku if we get Amari Cooper out and Flacco starting. I would like Njoku then.
Yeah.
I think if you took a chance on Kyle Pitts, that's fine. Cheap guy, I think might be okay to take a chance on is Conklin at 3K. He had 9 targets last week.
More Zach Wilson love from you.
Yeah. CJ Uzoma on IR. He's only 3K. So I don't know. I guess why not? But yeah, I don't know. I probably won't go below Likely.
The only other name down there I think is interesting. If Dalton Schultz doesn't play, I think Brevin Jordan's playable 3,100. He's actually decent last week, 3 for 64, and he's a guy that he catches the ball. Actually has some zoom to him. Like he's a talented, athletic guy. No Tank Dell, so you take a receiver out of the mix. If Schultz doesn't play, I think Jordan at 3,100 is playable. I think it's him and Likely down there, and yeah, Conklin works too. I think they're all kind of the same. Conklin's questionable also, so definitely check that. But yeah, if I didn't go Likely, it'd probably go Jordan if Schultz doesn't play.
Yeah, I like that. I played a ton of Jordan last week.
You got your 10 points at mid price.
Yeah,
that works.
And you know what? It could have been. I don't want to say it could have been more. I noticed last week. Stroud does not like to check it down. No. Jordan is just sitting there wide open where a lot of quarterbacks would check it down. And Stroud he's looking deep. He likes to extend the play. I mean, I was impressed by it, but also I just kept noticing Jordan on so many routes.
Right.
He didn't even really go out for routes, but he's just there as like a check down safety option. So it's possible that he could have had more targets. And yeah, like you mentioned, he's a guy that's like kind of built like a wide receiver a little bit, so he can make those bigger plays.
Yeah, it's not to catch the ball and fall down. Like, he can catch the ball and do something with it. Last time before we move on to defense, are you going to play Taysom Hill at 5,100? We mentioned him earlier at the very beginning. 15 touches last week. I think it was 13 rushes and 2 catches. Again, we talked about the confusing thing when if he's the backup quarterback, maybe they're scared to use him. 5,400, if he gets 15 touches, works really well. What are you doing with Taysom Hill this week?
Yeah, I'm a little worried that he hasn't practiced yet with foot and hand injuries, I guess. Like you said, if he got 15 touches, I would love to play him. I don't know if we could bank on that. I probably won't get there, but if anybody, I think it's a good gamble if somebody wanted to do it.
I probably won't get there either, but again, if you gave me 15 touches, I would do it every time. I think the backup quarterback thing might come into play. I think there might be a little more. I don't think you want to run him into the line with the injuries if he's your actual real backup. Defenses real quick before we jump out of here. What are you doing at defense this week? Last week was pretty good on defense. I think Indy did really well. Atlanta did really well. We talked about them, I believe. What do you like at defense this week in the mid range, the cheap range, whatever you want to go with?
Yeah, I think if Lawrence doesn't play, the Browns are just a smash at home for $3K.
That price surprised me. I guess we didn't know Lawrence was going to be out when they set the prices because he played Monday night, so that's probably why. But
right,
their sacks have been down the last couple of weeks. But yeah, at home, if Lawrence doesn't play, 3,000 seems like the Browns will be the way most popular guy.
Yes, they would be. After that, yeah, I don't know. I guess nothing stuck out too much. I don't know. Did you have anything?
I really like the Ravens at 3,300. I think they're a little too cheap. I know the Rams haven't given up a sack the last couple of weeks, but man, the Ravens have 3+ sacks, like a good number in 9 of the last 10 games. Like, I think that really works well there. I like the Ravens at 3,300. A nice swap from the Browns too, if you want to be a little different. I also like Minnesota at Vegas 3,100. Minnesota has multiple sacks in 4 of the last 5 games. Danielle Hunter can really get after the quarterback. Aiden O'Connell can make a mistake for us too. I think at 3,100, they make a nice little swap for the Browns too. So I'm kind of in that low 3 range. But I think I'm going to move a lot to Ravens and Vikings, just kind of avoid, when it comes to defense, I think the Browns are the best kind of on paper play. But when you get a defense that I kind of like, guys, similar, like to get away from the chalk when I can on defense because you're hoping for a fluke big play anyway. So I think for me, it's Baltimore and Minnesota, 3,300 at 3,100 this week.
Yeah, I think those are all good points. Great to get off the chalk defense too, whenever you can.
Is there anybody in the twos if you want to punt? Is it the Chiefs?
I know.
Is it the Chiefs? Or what is it down here?
I don't know. I guess it could be the Chiefs. I don't really want to do that. I kind of, but we've seen Allen turn it over. We saw people sort of targeting Josh Allen with defenses earlier in the season. The Chiefs defense had been really good for the most part all season. So yeah, I get that. I mean, I'd be more likely to just take a shot on the Bears. I don't know. Why not? The 2,400 at home, and we've seen Goff turning it over, throwing pick sixes. And we just seen Goff he looks shook a little bit at times out there. They've struggled in recent weeks. So yeah, I mean, I'm going to try to be with you in that low 3K range, but I wouldn't mind just going all the way down to the Bears.
Yeah, I think the other one in that range, the Falcons at 2,900. The Bucks gave up 6 sacks to the Colts, 4 to the Niners recently. The Falcons had 4 sacks last week. I think that I like the other ones more in that range, but I'm kind of in that mid range. Falcons, Browns, Vikings, Ravens. I think it'll probably almost all my laps will be one of those teams right in that range.
Yeah, I think me too.
Anybody else you want to talk about? I feel like we've hit this slate really in depth. We talked about everybody. We talked about guys we like, guys we don't like, kind of every game. Anything else on your mind you want to discuss before we jump out of here?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, I think we broke it down pretty in depth.
Is there soccer? Is there soccer for you to go talk about or this week or no?
Yeah, soccer podcast coming up in a half hour.
Nice.
Big, nice slate on Saturday. I guess just the last thing I'll say, emphasize again, pay attention to who starts at quarterback in the Jacksonville-Cleveland game for both teams. Yep. Lawrence and Flacco. I mean, it will dictate a lot of things about the slate and about that game. Yeah,
it really does. I kind of just cross it. If DTR starts, like I'm crossing all the pass catchers out. I just don't want any part of that.
Totally.
Same with if CJ Beathard starts, I'm not even thinking about anybody there. So yeah, you're right. It's an interesting spot where you have to figure that out. If Lawrence plays, it just opens up a lot of stuff. Or if Flacco plays, it opens up a lot of stuff too.
Yep.
Cool. Well, thanks everybody for listening. We do really appreciate that. As always, you please rate over the podcast. That helps out a lot. If you want to follow Ryan on Twitter, he is at Ryan Belongia, Belongia. I am at Scott Jenstad. Jenstad's Jenstad. Other than that, we appreciate everybody listening all year. We're at week 14. The season's flying by. It's been a lot of fun. I'll be back at you next Friday morning talking more DFS for week 15. Hope everybody has a really good week, a really good fantasy week, and take care.
Thanks, Scott. Good luck, everybody.